Hello everybody, I'm here to give us this week's Catechism question. We're at question 24. Wow, that's a lot, and there's a lot to remember, isn't there? And it's becoming quite tricky. But don't worry, I'm going to recap on last week's question right now. Last week's question was from Nigel, and it was, can anyone be saved by his own righteousness? And the answer was, no. No one is good enough for God. And this teaches us that while we think we're good, we're not good enough for God because we've sinned. But thankfully, if we trust in Jesus, God sees us as if we've never sinned. Well, let's move on to this week's question. This week's question is, what is adoption? And the answer is, it is God's goodness in receiving sinful rebels as his beloved children. Okay, let's say that together. What is adoption? It's God's goodness in receiving sinful rebels as his beloved children. Okay, let me tell you a story. Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. The story is about a girl named Lola. And her best friend in the whole wide world was called Eliza. And they loved each other just like sisters. But they weren't, because they came from different families. Well, one day, Lola went to her dad and said, I wish Eliza was my sister rather than just my best friend. And her dad responded and said, well, the only way that could happen is if Eliza's family adopts you. Then you'll become a member of their family, and Eliza's parents will become your parents. Is that what you want? Well, Lola thought for a very short period of time and said, yes, I really, really, really want Eliza to be my sister, so I'd love to be adopted by her parents. So Lola's dad got the phone and phoned Eliza's dad, who told him the story. And Eliza's dad said, of course, we would love to have Lola in our family. So Lola packed up her things and off she went to live in a new family. And because she's in a new family, she lives by the rules of that family. Well, that story teaches us about adoption, because Lola became part of a new family. She was adopted. And because she was adopted, she joins a new family. Well, the Bible has a very important verse to tell us about adoption. And it's found in 1 John chapter 3, verse 1. And it says this, see what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. Did you hear that? That we should be called children of God? Not just that, but that is what we are. We are children of God. God has adopted us and we have become members of his family. But only if we trust in Jesus. Because if you remember from last week, we're not good enough for God, are we? We have to trust in Jesus. And if we do that, if we trust in Jesus, then we become a member of God's family and we are his children. Now, if you think back to our story from a few moments ago, I think in that story Lola was probably quite a nice girl, and that's why Eliza's parents were happy to adopt her. But God's greater than that. He is so great that he adopts us even though we're sinners. Remember, we weren't good enough for God. We aren't able to keep up with his standard, but God still adopts us. And that just shows how great God's love is. He adopts us even though we weren't good enough. He adopts us even though we are sinners. Wow, that's a great story, isn't it? Not the story about Lola and Eliza, but the story about God and how he loves us so much that he brought us into his family, even though we're not good enough. So let's remind ourselves of this week's question and answer. The question is, what is adoption? And the answer is, it is God's goodness in receiving sinful rebels as his beloved children. That's fantastic news, isn't it?